While the counterweight idea seemed to be working okay, I was concerned about the weight I was adding and the additional stress it was placing on the motor and driving mechanism. I could throw in more motors and gears to increase torque output, but I'd either be slowing it way down or bloating the size of it. Thinking back to earlier work, I was using guide rails to keep the column in line. I figured I'd give them another shot, only this time repurposing the gear racks as the rails and installing gears on the actuators to hold the tension. I could have likely achieved the same result with lift arms and wheels, but finding the right diameter wheels and tyres, I was still having issues stabilising the whole thing. All that weight hanging from the front of the frame needed supporting, but I didn't want unsightly framework spoiling the appearance of the columns. I weighed up a few options, including literally weighing down the framework, but I felt the best support would come from the front. The columns would sink behind checkered terrain, but this wouldn't support them when extended. It would, however, conceal any framework used as support. I tested out a few L-shaped lift arms, curving out to the front of the columns and supported by bricks, so there'd be no room for flexing. This worked a treat. The columns would occasionally catch on the lift arms, but that could easily be worked out. Looking at the depth of the build so far, my switching mechanism was hanging over the rear of the base plate I was using. I wanted to try and keep within these confines, so I first looked at whether I could rotate the mech sideways. Unfortunately, this would impede on the frontal plane, so my best option would be modifying it. This was an easy job, digitally. Physically, much more annoying. But I had been wanting to add in a crank handle to operate things, so I would need to modify it anyway. I didn't want the crank arm sticking out the middle of the build. It needed to be lowered toward the base. So I began the process of splitting the mech in two and lengthening the framework as I thought I needed to. But just as I began adding connectors, I realised I could just rotate the mech and lay it on its back. With the switcher in place, it was an easy job building framework up to meet the drive shaft for the columns. As I was working on this system, I thought I'd take a look at connecting up the log bridge. The bridge only needed a simple rotational motion in one direction, so it needed running directly off the crank or motor input. I had previously built a mock-up of the log to test its strength, and it seemed to hold up okay. But I needed to calculate how long I could make the log to fit snugly between two bricks. A 2 stud wide gap is equal to 5 plates depth, and each log section is 4 plates tall, so the log's length would have to be based on multiples of 5 sections. 10 looked a bit short, but 15 looked good. From here I needed to connect the drivetrain to the switch mech's input. I was hoping I'd be able to do this more directly, but the gears wouldn't fit as I wanted. I tried rearranging the gears again until I thought I'd found a solution that would work. But then I realised I needed the log to turn quite slowly, so this wouldn't work either. To slow things down enough, I needed a worm gear. Thankfully, it wasn't too difficult modifying the frame to install one. All I had to do now was build a framework tower up to the log and couple the drive shafts together. While designing the direction switcher, I tested out a hypothesis I had in mind. If I lined up several small gears and rotated them about the axis of the first gear, would the rotation of the final gear remain relatively static? No. would be the unfortunate answer. There was too much slack in the gears. What if I removed the slack by chaining the two gears together? Okay, this works. But not if that first gear is allowed to rotate. But I need to rotate about its axle to make this swing. So I need the axle to rotate, but the gear to remain static. Lego make gears with pinholes through them. The axle wouldn't engage with the gear and can rotate freely. But the chain's tension will cause the gear to rotate, so it needs to be locked in position. An extension ring could lock it, but then the extension ring would need locking in position. Maybe a fixed gear could mesh with it and lock it. Well, that kind of works, but it looks like the platform is leaning out when raised to the apex. Could there still be some slack in the chain? What if I could lock the chain? That doesn't seem to make any difference. This may need a new approach. My next test involved an older style gear with small teeth on one side, which could be locked in place with a corresponding part. Once again, this had the problem of leaning out at the apex of the swing. I did actually test the swing with a weighted brick just to see what it might do, but it became a little unstable during movement. Looking through Lego parts, I spotted the curved gear racks and wondered whether they could work. As the arm swings, a gear could roll along the rack and keep the platform upright. Sadly, I realised the gear would rotate in the wrong direction, which even inverting the build wouldn't fix. While rummaging through my Lego drawers, I dug out a part that I'd never really used before. A Technic turntable. Using one of these, I should be able to attach the swing to the inner section while the gear rolls around the fixed outer section. But I'd need a gear ratio of 1:1 to keep the platform level. Thankfully, I found a handy ratio calculator to work this out. A 20-tooth gear would roll around the outside of the 60-tooth turntable, giving a ratio of 1:3. Then an 8-tooth gear on the same axle as the 20-tooth gear would drive a 24-tooth gear, giving a ratio of 3:1. This worked perfectly. The platform remained level throughout an entire rotation of the swing, but there was a new issue on the horizon. That lower red connector between the lift arms obviously can't move through physical barriers. Lego hasn't yet achieved quantum tunneling. I didn't really want all those gears to be visible, so could I create a channel for the connector to travel through? I built a wall and began checking where I needed to remove or add pieces. Lego does produce plenty of curved parts, some of which may have been useful here, but I was wary of what their usage may do to the checkered pattern. I thought maybe I could cover over the excess lift arm with a second layer, which the checkered pattern would help conceal. But that would create a lot of dangling stacks of 1x1 plates. I figured it may work better supporting the plates from below, so I decided to shift the lift arm lower. The swing still wasn't looking much like the swings in the game. That white block needed to go. I already had a design in mind, but no idea how to connect it to the swing arm. I scrolled through the list of connectors looking for some inspiration, and found something with potential, which happened to exist in a matching lime green. This looked okay, though I wasn't thrilled about the green strip in the centre. I tried out a few more options before finding the perfect choice, usefully available in dark orange. However, there was one last problem filling in that gap in the centre. It was 2.5 plates across, so it had to be filled with Technic. But the most suitable parts only came in bright orange. I guess that'll have to do. It'll match the log bridge at least. Oh, Sonic would also need a place to stand. There.